हमारे वक्त की धड़कन, हमारा चिंतन, हमारी भावनाएं, हमारे विचार, कभी कोमल बातचीत तो कभी इंटरेक्शन तेज तर्रार। तय करें मिलकर व्हाट इज रॉन्ग, व्हाट इज राइट। ITV पर अशोक व्यास के साथ इनसाइट टुनाइट। नमस्कार, मैं अशोक व्यास। कार्यक्रम का नाम इनसाइट टुनाइट विद अशोक व्यास, और इस कार्यक्रम में अलग अलग विषयों पर नजर डालते हुए हम समझने की कोशिश करते हैं दुनिया को और दुनिया के साथ अपने रिश्ते को। दुनिया के साथ अपने रिश्ते को बेहतर कैसे बनाया जाए, इस तरफ काम करने वाले कई लोगों में से कुछ लोग ऐसे हैं जो सचमुच काम करते हैं, सचमुच देखते हैं कि जो समस्याएं हमारे सामने हैं उनके समाधान कैसे निकाले जा सकते हैं, कैसे ढूंढे जा सकते हैं समाधान। और आज जब हम बात कर रहे हैं तो तारीख वो है जिसके एक दिन बाद यानी 16 मई को भारत में चुनाव परिणाम आने के संकेत मिलने लग जाएंगे। सारे देश की निगाहें हैं कि अगली सरकार भारत में किसकी बनने वाली है। पर आज के कार्यक्रम में हम नजर भारत से हटाकर ही नहीं बल्कि भारत पर रखते हुए भी उस तरफ ले जा रहे हैं आपको जहां हम सबकी नजर 365 दिन रहती है, विशेषकर मदर्स डे के दिन रहती है। और महिलाओं की समस्याओं को लेते हुए जब हम आज विचार करते हैं तो मदर्स डे पर मिशेल ओबामा ने अपने संदेश में नाइजीरिया में जिन निर्दोष मासूम बालिकाओं के अपहरण पर चिंता व्यक्त की थी वो बात भी हमारे साथ है। और उस बात को लेते हुए हम मुस्लिम वर्ल्ड में महिलाओं की स्थिति पर चिंतन करते हुए आज स्वागत कर रहे हैं फाउंडर्स और को फाउंडर ऑफ विमेन फॉर अफगान विमेन सुनीता विश्वनाथ जी का। सुनीता जी, स्वागत है आपका।
नमस्ते जी।
And we are also fortunate to have Nahid Bahram with us, and she's the director of Afghan Women for Afghan Women, New York. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I would like to share a clip of the address of Michelle Obama, but before that, let me ask you, Nahid. Mother's Day, being up from Afghanistan a few years ago, maybe you probably weren't familiar about this tradition. Did you hear about Mother's Day back home?
We do celebrate it. We do celebrate Mother's Day in Afghanistan, and it's celebrated really widely at the time. But it's different here than celebrating it in Afghanistan.
When you say different, then I'm tempted to ask you, what is the basic difference?
Usually their parents are having more children, so they will not get the same gifts as they are getting it here. But I'm sure they will get the same love there.
Wonderful. So love is the key. And now before we go to the first lady, Sunita, for you, what is the significance of Mother's Day? Now you have 3 kids.
I have 3 sons, and for a year now, my mother and father, who were living in England, a year ago they moved to live with me. And so I have my mother with me. I feel very, very fortunate. And I have my 3 kids. And this Mother's Day, just Sunday, I'm very proud that a group of kids from my son's school organized a vigil right outside school at 11 o'clock in the morning for the Nigerian girls who have been abducted. And so it grounded my Mother's Day in something very meaningful, because actually I was having a hard time celebrating knowing that there were these close to 300 Nigerian mothers whose daughters have been taken from them.
सचमुच ये समाचार सुनकर हम सब शॉक रह जाते हैं। ऐसा लगता है हाउ दिस कैन बी। एंड देन वी हियर इन दिस era where terrorists have the ability to communicate through internet, through video. They abducted these girls from the school, and then they were blaming why were they given Western education in these schools. And they threatened, and probably they have already sold some of these girls to the jihadis. They also claimed that these girls are being converted. Now, what kind of world are we living in? We feel that there is this group of people who calls themselves Islamic fundamentalist, or is it the name given to them by others? So being a Muslim woman, Nahid, when you hear something like this, How is the reaction?
It's heartbreaking because Islam has never said to stop your daughters from getting education. Actually, Prophet Muhammad, there's a saying from Prophet Muhammad saying that at the time he said that send your children to Chin to get education. Even to Chin at the time, getting from Saudi Arabia to Chin, which was the hardest thing to do, was said that send your children for education there. And it has never been said in any part of the Quran that the women are not allowed to take education. I'm very breaking with this, that they have put it on Islam. And me as a Muslim, my father had made sure that our daughters got the best education that he could give them.
So that is a reasonable way to look at it. And then how to react. Probably First Lady Michelle Obama is inspiring in the sense that she raised voice against this in such a powerful manner. We'll take a look at this short clip from her message on Mother's Day.
On this Mother's Day weekend, I want to take a moment to honor all the mothers out there and wish you a happy Mother's Day. I also want to speak to you about an issue of great significance to me as First Lady, and more importantly, as the mother of 2 young daughters. Like millions of people across the globe, my husband and I are outraged and heartbroken over the kidnapping of more than 200 Nigerian girls from their school dormitory in the middle of the night. This unconscionable act was committed by a terrorist group determined to keep these girls from getting an education. Grown men attempting to snuff out the aspirations of young girls. And what happened in Nigeria was not an isolated incident. It is a story we see every day as girls around the world risk their lives to pursue their ambitions. It's the story of girls like Malala Yousafzai from Pakistan. Malala spoke out for girls' education in her community, and as a result, she was shot in the head by a Taliban gunman while on a school bus with her classmates. But fortunately, Malala survived. And when I met her last year, I could feel her passion and determination as she told me that girls' education is still her life's mission. As Malala said in her address to the United Nations, she said, "The terrorists thought that they would change our aims and stop our ambitions, but nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born." The courage and hope embodied by Malala and girls like her around the world should serve as a call to action.
So there is call for action, and that action has to be a positive action, positive with the spirit that is indestructible. And this phrase, spirit indestructible, in some way defines the focus of Women for Afghan Women. And Sunita ji, how this organization was formed? You are from India, and I don't think you ever visited Afghanistan before starting this organization.
No. In the late 1990s, I was in India actually, from 97 through 2000. And before that, I worked in quite a few women's organizations here in New York. And then I moved to India for a short period of time. My second son was just born, he was a baby, and my older son was 3 years old. And I was outside of my work context in India, studying actually, doing my master's, but couldn't help but be disturbed and obsessed by what was happening at that time under the Taliban in Afghanistan. There's no rational reason, but I was called to those little snippets of news buried in the newspapers of stonings and assassinations of women, the terrible human rights abuses that were happening under the Taliban. And in 2000, the year 2000, when I came back to this country, I came back determined to do something. I came back determined to act. that. And I was working at a women's foundation, and so my power was that I could give a grant to a group of women, and I searched high and low for that group of women. I found many Afghan students in universities around New York City and many other concerned individuals. We started having regular meetings at my office, and slowly but surely we realized that while there wasn't such an organization that I was looking for in New York, we were becoming that organization. And in April 2001, we named ourselves Women for Afghan Women. Our two priorities, one is really very close to my heart. It is to be community rooted. And so from day one, I wanted to go to Queens, where I learned that the Afghan community was concentrated. I didn't want to do anything without being very close to the Afghan community. The other piece is also very strong till this day, and it's outspoken advocacy for human rights. And both of those are the priorities today, 13 years on.
So 13 years, and it's a long time, and it's just a coincidence. This was April 2001 that Women for Afghan Women was formed. And in 2001, we have witnessed something which has kind of transformed the whole world. It has shifted a lot of equations amongst many nations. 9/11 happened in 2001. So right after that also, was there any special role or challenges that came for this organization?
Over the year 2000 and early 2001, what was spectacular was that nobody was paying attention. We were having these conversations about human rights abuses in Afghanistan, about the Taliban, and people may have heard about it. People were signing petitions here and there. But even in the women's movement in this country, it wasn't a priority. And so we could have kept on having our conversations and trying to make a little noise, but almost on deaf ears did we fall. And then in a real twist of ironic fate, 9/11, as dreadful as it was to us in New York and to everybody in Afghanistan too, ironically, everything opened for us. And the organization, at that time, we were a group of volunteers, women, many of us Afghan. We were called to speak. We were called to teach-ins all across New York City. And then the Afghan women in our group and others that we knew from the community didn't think they could ever go back to Afghanistan. And one by one, people started going back, being a part of reconstruction, being a part of the government, starting businesses in Afghanistan. Everything opened, and our organization started to receive grant money. All of a sudden, people knew our cause, knew where Afghanistan was even on a map. And so, yeah, it's a strange double-edged event, 9/11, in our context, because our future was made possible by it.
Now, going to you, Nahid, the Taliban word was not very familiar word for many people. Was it similar in Afghanistan as you were growing up? There was a period when this Taliban became more active. People started paying attention to what this group of, call them young men, want, and why they behave the way they behave. Why are they imposing certain rules? So recollect with me, you probably were growing up at that time in Afghanistan?
I was. It was unfamiliar to a lot of places in the world, but especially to Afghanistan. I grew up in Afghanistan. There weren't any madrasas for Taliban. I did not know, and today, even to the date, we do not have any madrasas teaching these Taliban inside Afghanistan. These were mostly Taliban who were grown up in Pakistan or in other countries around us, and that's how they got their way inside Afghanistan. Even to the date, not many our Talibans are Afghan. So this was something very new to the people in the country. But because they have gone through civil war, so they had an hope in that. They came as Muslims. And nobody knew that none of the work that they were doing is connected anyway to Islam. Killing people was not in Islam. Stopping girls from going to school was not in Islam. So before they would come to Afghanistan, because people were going through the civil war for a long time, they had an hope that these are real Muslims and they will come and they will bring change. And unfortunately, that was not the story.
So there is this side of our collective experience that many things leave footprints of unfortunate events, and how and what we can learn from these footprints. Is there any hope? And I believe with Spirit Indestructible, the way Women for Afghan Women organization has grown, this also shows us that there is hope. And we'll talk about the work and the stories of women who have found a kind of shelter, a kind of support in this organization. So stay with us. We have a lot to share right after this break. वेलकम बैक, यू आर वाचिंग इनसाइड टुनाइट विद अशोक व्यास। और जैसा आपने एक प्रोमो देखा जिससे आपको ये पता चला कि कल रात 11 बजे से इनसाइड टुनाइट लाइव इज गोइंग टू बी द शो टॉकिंग अबाउट election results as they happen, as we come to know of them, all these datas, we'll be talking about that. और आप भी कॉल करके रात को, देर रात को भी बात कर सकते हैं भारत के चुनाव परिणामों के बारे में इस कार्यक्रम में। और आज के हमारे अतिथियों की तरफ बढ़ने से पहले आई जस्ट फील लाइक शेयरिंग द वर्ड्स ऑफ आवर प्रेसिडेंट अब्दुल कलाम फॉर द फ्यूचर प्राइम मिनिस्टर whosoever he or she, if there is a she, happens to be. He says, India needs a creative leadership which is the most important component for attaining success in all missions. So who is a creative leader? He asked this question and then he replies, it is a leader who could shift seamlessly from being a commander to a coach, manager to a mentor, and a director to a delegate. Youth of today want democracy regardless of their nationality, regardless of whether they live in a democratic India, communist China, or under any monarchy. The youth globally and unanimously agree that the future belongs to systems which are of the people, by the people, for the people. And I thought words of Dr. Kalam are relevant even for Afghanistan. Afghanistan is also undergoing this democratic process, and we are fortunate to be joined by co-founder of Women for Afghan Women as well as director of this organization in New York. So Sunita ji, let's talk a little bit about Afghanistan from the point of view of democratic process. Has there been some role of this organization in that process in making people more aware of democracy?
One of the things that we do, we should talk about what we do. We are active. The first program that we started was in New York because we were founded in New York, and Naheed runs the program in New York. It's a community center, and women learn their rights. They learn English, they learn computers, they learn life skills, and they have help with addressing crises in their life, including domestic violence and other things that they might be experiencing in their life. After we started our work in New York, our executive director, Manisha Naderi, back then she was running the work in New York. She was doing Naheed's job. She was impassioned leader, and she wanted to grow the work to Afghanistan, and she wanted to be there for her sisters back home. And in 2005, Manisha said to us, the board of directors, I want to do this work, which is so meaningful, in Afghanistan itself. And with our support and with as a group, we took Women for Afghan Women to Afghanistan in 2006. And between 2006 and today, we have grown from working in Kabul to working in 10 provinces across Afghanistan. We run more women's shelters, you talked about shelter, than any other NGO. We run my favorite program, which is Children's Support Center. We have 4 of them today. They are residences for little girls and boys whose mothers are in prison, because in Afghanistan, when women go to prison, the first horror is that most of them have not committed what any of us would consider a crime. They have either run away from abuse, or they have eloped, or what they call honor crimes or zina. And their children go to prison with them. We run these 4 residences for those children, so they get an education. In prison, there's no education. This is the work that we do. Along with that, we do advocacy and human rights trainings. So we go out.
We will talk a little bit more about each of them as the time permits, but I want Naib to share with us the way she described, looks like many women who are innocent, they find themselves behind the bar for this or that. Is the law tilted in favor of men in Afghanistan, would you say, or it is the interpretation which makes women victim?
I think it's the interpretation of it. The laws are there in the book, but not all the laws are being followed in the country. Corruption is a huge issue. So a man who, if we see in a family the crime is done, the man is the one who is having the money. The woman is a housewife. So usually he's the one who will bribe at the first place the police, and then it goes to the court and all those things. And not many women they have access to an attorney to represent them. So Women for Afghan Women is there to do those services for them. We have attorneys and staff who are helping these women who were in need. We have all these free services for them. So unfortunately, there is the law, but not being followed.
So now talking about education or awareness, Sunita ji, since 2006 to 2013, and you must have visited Afghanistan a couple of times, has there been any noticeable change in terms of perception of people with the help of education?
Without a doubt. 2 things. One is, you talked about, I didn't answer the question about elections. On April 5th, which happens to be my birthday, 60% of Afghans, in spite of the Taliban's every effort to wreak havoc on that day, showed up for democracy and showed up for the right to education. I mean, Taliban is not unlike Boko Haram in that one of the things that would go if they came back into power is especially girls' right to education, and in some cases boys too. So the country has spoken, and it's a very young country. It's the youth that form the majority of the population. And so they've really said, we want to go forward, and this is such an exciting moment in Afghanistan. It's a transfer of power in a democratic process for the first time in that nation's history. And so we are a part of that, and I absolutely think that the work of Women for Afghan Women in getting legal justice for women, every client of ours, every child in the Children's Support Center, every woman who comes through our doors has an access to education, literacy, vocational education, and for the kids, they all go to school. And the right to education is really a cornerstone of any kind of democratic progress in any nation, and Afghanistan is no exception.
Education is important, but what kind of education we are giving to our children is the question that is quite often raised. So now, based on your experience, you have taught to some refugees also, Afghan refugees in Pakistan.
Yes.
You were working with them. Set the stage in terms of our understanding. What is the life of a refugee like? It's very painful to think that you are uprooted and you're trying to find life somewhere else.
Yes. So I myself, I was a refugee when Mujahideen were in power in Afghanistan and the civil war started. So I lost my mother in a rocket, in a bomb explosion in Afghanistan. After that, we decided to flee the country, and we moved to Peshawar as refugees, where I started school and refugee schools. And I also studied English, where I was able to start teach back in the place where I graduated, the refugee woman in Peshawar. And when I came to United States and I saw the difference between the way people are so thirsty for education there, but they do not have the resources. And I came here and saw kids here with having all these resources for them, but not attending it. Mm-hmm. For example, public libraries. You could hardly ever find any library there. There were a few in Peshawar, especially not accessible for people who were refugees there. And people wouldn't have computers where they could research or do the homework. And here I came and saw the public libraries where there's all these computers for kids to go and use it for free, but you do not see any children being there. So these were the changes that I would see in Afghanistan and Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then in the United States, that there is resources, but not many people interested in. We were, as a student, when I attended the Afghan refugee schools in Peshawar, we were studying, our classes were under the tent, and the weather in Peshawar is really warm. We would be in the classroom for the weather would be 49 to 48 degrees Celsius.
Oh man.
And it was really hot, but kids were still interested. People were still interested to send their daughters and their sons to get education. So that's the difference I saw. But not having enough resources, but a lot of thirst for education.
I think this is something, I have kids here. Kids here absolutely take a lot for granted, and it's our responsibility to show them the rest of the world. But in a country like Afghanistan and Nigeria, going to school is often a threat to your life. And still they go to school. And we have had letters written by tribal leaders, men, in handwriting on, scraps of paper that have come to us in the mail, and begging us to come to their province, to come to their village, start a school, bring your facilities here. We need help here. I mean, we are now in 10 provinces and we want to grow. And so far, there has not been a single province, a governor, no situation where we've been told, no, you represent, women's rights. Don't come here. You are not welcome. In fact, if we had the funding, we would be in more provinces right now. And so, there are many stereotypes about the part of the world where we work. And so far, in Queens, New York, in the community, and all across Afghanistan, those stereotypes, as far as I'm concerned, have been smashed. And we have a third of our staff are men, Afghan men, 618 staff in Afghanistan. A third are Muslim men who wake up every day and get dressed and go to work and fight for women's rights. And I'd like the world to know that those men are heroes, because the work we do is life-threatening.
Those men are definitely heroes, but just taking the liberty of entering into slightly lighter lane. So they work in an organization which is Women for Afghan Women. So how that makes them feel, and do people make fun of them on the ground, Nahid?
I don't think so. I think men in Afghanistan, if you see what media shows is not all about Afghanistan. What media shows is not the real picture of Afghanistan, unfortunately. And I promise you, if you go into Afghanistan, you will see a different picture. As Sunita said, men who are working, people are tired of what's going on in that country. And I think men and women want a change in Afghanistan. And I think the change starts from within the household. So if they see the peaceful houses, they will see peaceful communities and peaceful country. And that's how I think the men who work for Women for Afghan Women, they believe in that.
The man who is the counselor in our Kabul Children's Support Center, actually his mother runs it, and he's the counselor there. He said to me, if you have a bird, it has two wings, two sides. One side is man, one side is woman, and there has to be balance. And we have a case, one client, she had to come from a northern province to Kabul in a car, and her brother, who was a Taliban member, was in the car with her just to be her escort, just to be with her. And in the long journey that to Kabul, he was witness to the staff and whoever was in the car and the way they were supporting his sister, who had been tortured and was escaping a very dangerous family situation. And by the time he got to Kabul, he told Manisha, our executive director, that my eyes are opened. I didn't know that women could do work like this. I didn't know that my sister would be taken care of like this. My life has changed. My eyes are opened. I'm no longer a part of the Taliban. And he's willing to go on camera to say this. I want to tell you about an older man who had a baby girl who was 5 years old, and she is now 12. She was raped in her village in Badakhshan by somebody in the village. This father, this Muslim father of a girl who was a peasant and a farmer, he left his livelihood, he left his family and came to Kabul with his girl, Husnia, and brought her to Women for Afghan Women and said, I'm taking a room near your office. Please do justice for my daughter. And we did. Our attorneys, we have many staff attorneys, went to fight her case. The rapist was put behind bars, and Husnia is, even though she could go back to her family, she is still with us because she is studying and she's thriving and she loves us, and she goes and visits her family often. And actually, when she goes to Badakhshan back to her family in her village, she's like a film star because she shows they come and make a circle around her and she shows them how she can read. And so they come and, there's a party, and it's just one of thousands of stories of men who are our partners in this. The work in Afghanistan, even before the Taliban, could not have happened without men supporting women. When you hear about the stories of women's girls' schools, women running girls' schools underground, all the work for human rights that was happening at the time happened because there were men who were willing to go to support women, be their escort, because you remember during those times women couldn't move around without male escort. So those men that were going around with the women who were teaching and so forth, doing the forbidden activities, were women's rights activists who were our brothers and our supporters, and that's the case today as well.
So you're sitting with, call them members or co-founder of Women for Afghan Women, and of course director of this organization in New York, and the kind of stories and insight which they have with their direct experiences of working with many women who have suffered. And my heart goes out for Nahid, who shared that her mother, she lost her in a blast, and how difficult it is to come to terms with something like that in one's life. But not only coming to terms with that incident, she has moved on and she is sharing the strength with others in a way which is definitely inspiring. And one aim of this program, Insight Tonight, is that we know a little bit more about the world that we don't see on day-to-day basis. We learn about people whom we don't meet on day-to-day basis. Somewhere that tells us, as Sunita ji mentioned and Nahid shared, so much resources are available here, and it's a great blessing to be able to go to school every day. And that value, that importance, when we realize, it enriches us in a way that is difficult to describe. But there is much more to learn about this organization, and also how they manage to sustain all this wonderful work that they are doing. We'll talk about that, and maybe there is some hint that you could also become a part of support group for this organization. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. ITV family and Dr. Banal Vishwanath invites you to celebrate Indian election results 2014 with ITV Gold, presenting historical night-long live show Insight Tonight with Ashok Vyas starting Thursday, 15th May, 11 p.m. Join us for live results, live analysis with experts. Share your thoughts by calling and participating in this very special night-long live show, Saluting India's Vibrant Democracy, Thursday, 11 p.m. वेलकम बैक टू इनसाइट टुनाइट विद अशोक व्यास। हमारे साथ हैं आज विमेन फॉर अफगान विमेन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की को-फाउंडर और न्यूयॉर्क चैप्टर की डायरेक्टर, एंड वी आर टॉकिंग टू सुनीता एंड नाहिद। सो नाहिद, बैक टू यू। कंपेयर हाउ is life different for women who are back home and those Afghani women who are here in terms of the challenges that they face?
I think women in Afghanistan I can't compare, like if you say through the security, through the situations they are and all these things. Again, resources that they have in Afghanistan, resources they have in United States, those are completely different. We all know that. But when it comes to a woman who came from Afghanistan here as refugees, we know that many people come to this country with that American dream, to pursue their American dreams. It's not true for the Afghan community here, because most Afghan communities leave their families to be alive, to survive. And the same as I said, like I lost my mother, I didn't leave the country because we wanted to be in a better place. We left our entire house with all the household goods and everything we had to just survive. So that is a little bit tougher when you come to a different country and start from the beginning. And for many of these Afghan women who are living in New York, is the same. They leave the families behind and come here, mostly getting married to an Afghan American or just coming with their own immediate family members here. It's all the challenges they have, not understanding the language, a different culture, a different religion, obviously a complete different system of education. Besides all that, they are also isolated. A lot of Afghan women who are living here, they do not have people around them to share their problems and issues with. So first, they do not have immediate family members to talk to, and then if they have neighbors and friends, they cannot communicate with them. The community we serve in New York, there are a lot of Afghan in New York. It's more than 20,000 Afghans living in New York in all the boroughs. But the community we serve is a very conservative community. About 80% of the people who come to our organization, about 80% of these women have never been to school. So for them, the challenges are bigger compared to a woman who have done her education back in Afghanistan. So beside all the other challenges, as I mentioned, isolation is another one added to. Domestic violence is an issue in the community and not much talked about. Because when it's talked about in our community, it's usually a woman is the one who's to be blamed for the problems in the family. So when you do not have your own family who can understand you, you can't find anyone else who would understand your issues and problem. So for these women, the Women for Afghan Women is a support group, a family away from their own country. So we are there to give them that support, that moral support, that services that they are entitled to. In New York, we have different programs from education. We offer programs for the women, learning computer and English, but also prepare them for their citizenship test and driving permit, so that the woman would be more independent. We also helped the victims of domestic violence, from finding them to the shelter to taking care of the child support and spousal support and all the other court issues and problems. We do not have attorneys and staff here in New York, but we always refer them to organizations, to sister organizations that are doing the similar work. Women for Afghan Women is working with the community, taking care of all the needs that they have. Especially when a woman comes to us, they come in a hope, as we are not an American organization, that when they come with the domestic violence issue, the first thing that we will offer them is get your divorce. We are trying to keep the families together, because for people in Afghanistan, divorce is a huge thing. And for these women who come to us, it's almost, for most of them, it's impossible to live with their husband. We do make sure that they are safe in living in that house. The children are safe in that relationship. But we work with the community elders to make sure that what they need is there.
So let me interrupt you for a second. And Sunita ji, when there is such a situation of domestic violence, and of course there is one party which is, and in this case, since we are talking about women suffering, then the man is not understanding his role and he's not sensitive to the needs, and he has some sort of limitation in understanding. So until and unless that limitation is addressed, this problem is not going to go away. So from that point of view, are there any call them programs in place or provisions whereby man is also
Sure. In both in New York and definitely in Afghanistan, we work with the men. And as Nahid said, separation, divorce is not the first and immediate solution. It's certainly not what most of the women want, and we are guided by what the client wants. We don't decide for anybody. And in New York, once I walked into the office, and Nahid was in a room with a client, a beautiful young woman. Her husband was there, the local imam was there, and some other extended family was there. I unfortunately haven't learned Dari because so many Afghans know a little Urdu and I get by because of movies and whatever, so I've been lazy, so somebody was translating for me, and yet again, the stereotypes get smashed. There was the client, the woman, who wanted to stay with this husband who didn't want to stay with her. It wasn't domestic violence necessarily. I think he had another lover and he wanted to leave. And the imam was saying to the young girl, the wife, my daughter, you are like my daughter. I've talked to your husband, I've talked to the whole family, I've talked to you. You deserve better than this. This man doesn't want to be with you, and I'm advising you to choose a different future. This young woman wanted to save her marriage, and she tried to, and I don't know in the end what happened. But this meeting that Nahid organized, called a jirga or a mediation meeting, it's very much a part of how we do our work. And the fact that the imam was there, trying to help this family to figure out is not rare for our organization. When there are domestic violence cases, he and the other imams will help. He will ask in the community, is there a family that will take this woman for a few days? She needs to be somewhere safe. Or he will take up a collection for, ask the people in the mosque to give money because she needs that. In Afghanistan, the last time I was there, when I went to our Family Guidance Center in Kabul, Family Guidance Center is one of our programs. That's where all the attorneys work on the legal cases. I was shocked and amazed. There was a line of men, many of them in turbans, out of the facility and around the corner, a long line of them, and I wondered what was happening. They were talking with each other, waiting to enter, and it was, we have male counselors. We have female counselors working with the female clients, and then there are men who are hired to work with the men. And so when there's one of these, when we have a case and mediation is going on, the men in the family, the perpetrators of the violence, if it's a domestic violence case, are given the opportunity to come and get a load off their chest and talk about what's going on. And almost in every case, they take us up on it, and they come willingly, and they share. No one's asked them before, how do you feel? What do you want? Are you also suffering? And I haven't been in one of those sessions, but I learned that when the men are very eager to share and take advice, and in many of our cases, we're able to resolve the immediate problem. Our staff keeps making unannounced and announced visits to the home to see how the situation is at home. We do have shelters, as I told you. We have more shelters than any other NGO. They are for the extreme cases where the woman is, her life is in danger, or there's a legal case that has to be resolved, or she chooses to go to shelter. But the vast majority of our cases, we have to maintain the woman's safety within the family, and working with the men is absolutely key to that. And we are successful.
Talking about working with men, and it is very important that people know that there is a way out, and all human beings love to be heard.
Yes.
And we also love to hear as well. But sometimes, since there is so much in us that wants to come out, we need proper place where we have trust, where we have faith that what I'm saying is not going to be a tool to work against me. So that building that kind of trust is a very, very challenging thing. And awareness spreads with some key figures, if they also become a part of what you are doing. From that point of view, Akshay Kumar visiting the film star Akshay Kumar, and now this is Women for Afghan Women. So tell us, what is that story?
That story, it's a very sad story. Mumtaz, one of our clients, she was actually quite widely covered in the press. You can look up the stories in the New York Times and other papers. She was attacked by a young man and his brothers and friends in the middle of the night with acid because she refused a marriage proposal. She and her family supported her right. They said, fine, you don't want to marry, that's okay. Eventually she got engaged to somebody else, and the original guy who proposed to her was incensed, and he came in the middle of the night with his cohorts, and they attacked the family. They beat up the father, and they poured acid from above. So she's very badly scarred, and her sister also caught some of the acid. So she also has, Farhanaz also has acid burns. And this is one of the cases, and I'm so proud about this, that the Indian government and the Indian embassy in Kabul have been extremely supportive. The Indian government has said that they will cover Mumtaz's medical expenditures for her life. She's made many trips to Delhi. She's in the Apollo Hospital when she goes there. She's about to go again. And all of this is for free. We're not paying anything. And once I went to speak with her, and I tried to make it light and talked about, not about her medical situation, not about her education, because I understand she's a little lazy as a student. Didn't talk about that. I just said, what's your dream? If you could have anything in the world, what would it be? And she said, well, she actually said, I want to marry Akshay Kumar. Oh. So I think he's happily married. That's not possible. But when she was next in Delhi, I, through friends, managed to get a message through to him that this young girl's dream has to do with him. And as if by magic, one day, he didn't give us any notice. We just got a message saying that Akshay Kumar has come to Apollo Hospital. And he came to her room, and her sister was there, and our staff person was there. And he said, I heard that you want to meet me. And it was incredible. And she was completely tongue-tied. And he said, if you really wanted to meet me, don't you have anything to say to me? And she just didn't say a word. And her sister said, and I don't follow the movies so much, so I don't know, but apparently he died in his previous film. And so her sister Farhanaz said, she's really shocked that you're here because she thought maybe you really died in your previous. So that was one of those precious moments that make this world a better place.
So it is very difficult to assimilate different emotions working together. So here is this hero really acting as a hero, working extra mile to add happiness or provide some sense of support to this lady who is suffering. And then this is Indian Embassy that has also helped. Now, we have very little time left, and I want you both to talk to us a little bit about your way of raising funds to sustain all this wonderful work.
Our organization is very, very fortunate that a huge proportion of our budget, which has grown to more than $5 million today, all this work costs money, and about 90% of that budget right this moment is being supported by the U.S. government. And that's something that is amazing, and all of us who are Americans should be quite grateful and proud of that. Now, as we all know, 2014 is a year of transition. Not only is it a very exciting transition, as in the country is going to have a new leader, and hopefully and it looks like one that is going to be there for the women of the country. The other part of the transition is scary for us as a women's organization because our work depends on security, and the foreign forces that are in Afghanistan are leaving. The drawdown is well underway, and we only hope that the Afghan army and the police and so forth are able to keep the country safe so that we can do our work. As the Americans leave, in a few years, it is absolutely the case that the funding from the government is likely to go down. What we need to do, and the world has promised over the years that they will never again abandon the women of Afghanistan. We have to come through on that promise. We need, like so many other organizations, we need individuals in America, in India, in every country of the world to give a small amount, a big amount, whatever they can give, whatever you all can give. I'm a full-time volunteer for this organization, and so as a volunteer and as a donor to the organization, I can ask all of you to join me and support this work. We need to keep going. We would like to do this work in every province of Afghanistan and to
if you
grow.
want to find out more about this organization, there is a wonderful website with tons of information, womenforafghanwomen.org. So you can check out all the projects that they have. And in the last 30 seconds that we have, I want Nahid to say something about the future. How do you feel the future of Women for Afghanistan?
We are very hopeful, and we see that the youth are there. More than 70% of Afghanistan are youth, and they are educated youth. They are all going to school in the past 12 years, and we are hopeful for the future. So that's why we want Women for Afghan Women to grow as it grew in the past few years. I would request everybody to please go to our website and see our upcoming gala on May 29th. And please do join or support us in any way you can so that we will be able to continue the good work.
Wonderful. So I repeat, May 29th is the date to mark your calendar for this gala, and details you can find from womenforafghanwomen.org. It is the spirit indestructible that brought Nahid and Sunita Vishwanath to ITV studio. They have incredible stories which are painful and yet inspiring. Lots of good wishes, and thank you very much for doing what you are doing, Nahid and Sunita.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
As I thank them, I thank all of you for being with us. And again, I want to remind you, tomorrow night is the night. We'll have a regular Insight tonight at 7:30, and at 11 p.m. we'll have a night-long live show to celebrate the vibrancy of Indian democracy. Till then, this is Ashok Vyas.